Well, let's follow up on the campaign announcements today with three-party commentators. Geoff Turner is a Liberal commentator. He's with me in our studio here. And from Toronto, we're joined by Andrew Brander. He's a Conservative commentator. And Tom Parkin is an NDP commentator. Good to see you all, gentlemen. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Geoff.
Thanks. Andrew, let me start with you if I can. Let's begin with the Conservative pledge today from Andrew Scheer to call a judicial inquiry into the SNC-Lavalin affair and bring in a law to allow the RCMP to go to the Supreme Court to have cabinet confidentiality lifted. I'm wondering about the political wisdom of making that pledge in Justin Trudeau's riding in Quebec, where there's a feeling in the province of Quebec that he mostly did the right thing. He got involved in SNC-Lavalin to protect jobs. So are you worried this could backfire for Conservatives in Quebec?
No, I don't think so. I think, look, there's still a lot of unanswered questions on the SNC scandal. And if the Prime Minister's not willing to stand up and take responsibility and answer those questions for Canadians, then someone's got to. And I think it's a very timely announcement given the conversation that's going on right now. There's a lot of cynicism, a lot of mistrust of politicians. Just in general, you look at the situation going on south of the border. I think this is a very topical conversation where, it sometimes takes a greater authority to come in and answer those questions because no one's above the law.
Okay, Tom Parkin, SNC-Lavalin back on the agenda, at least for today. Should it be?
It's an important issue, so it should never disappear because we really truly don't know what happened in all these processes, and we never heard the full testimony. So it continues to be an issue politically. How this plays, Mr. Scheer went right to the Liberal leader's riding. That was the point of it. It was sort of a confrontation kind of idea, whether it was intended to play in Quebec or whether it was intended to play to the larger Canadian audience. I suspect more the latter than the former. And I think the point here is for him to try and bring it back to some of the negatives that people have about Mr. Trudeau in kind of backroom deals that he's been part of over the last number of years that become controversial.
Right. Okay. So Andrew Scheer is talking SNC-Lavalin. Jagmeet Singh was talking housing today and affordability, and Geoff Turner, your leader, was talking about the environment. But let me start with the SNC-Lavalin issue and what your response is to having Andrew Scheer throw that out again today.
I think it was pretty clearly a stunt, and I think the fact that it was done in the Prime Minister's riding underscores that point, just from an objective perspective. I think the SNC issue has always been a strategic and tactical plan for the Conservatives throughout the election, and I think it just hasn't come up in a while, and this was their moment to try to bring it back onto the agenda. I think there's been some good legal analysis actually in the hours since that announcement that really the promise to go straight to the Supreme Court really just cuts out two lower levels of government, which the RCMP are able to go through today. So it doesn't actually really fundamentally change the ability of an investigator to get that information, but they still can do it through the courts today. So I think it's probably more of a 1 or 2 day stories. Also interesting that Mr. Scheer went to Montreal on the eve of the climate march, which I know we're going to talk about later, but that's also perhaps a miscalculation. It's a little bit like being in the same community as a Pride Parade and not going to it the day after.
All right, we're going to talk about that in just a bit, but let me stick with you for a second, then I'm going to go to Andrew. So Justin Trudeau announced today, a pledge to protect more land, more water, but he also announced this seemed to come out of nowhere, this pledge to send more kids to camp at a cost of $150 million by 2024. Is that what the federal government's in the business of doing, sending kids to camp?
I think they're in the business of trying to help kids in particular who have been disadvantaged, and they've done it through a number of policies like the Canadian Child Benefit and other things. In this instance, it's helping those kids get the same kind of experience that kids who perhaps have a bit more privilege in life have the ability to go and learn how to camp. And I think the Prime Minister himself has always been clear that he comes from a place where he's enjoyed nature as a young person. He's grown up in that community. He's an excellent canoeer, as we saw today. And I think helping people who may not be exposed to the beauty of Canada outside of our urban areas or our towns is an important opportunity that they can offer to people.
Andrew, where do you think that sending kids to camp should rank on the list of priorities when money can be tight?
Yeah, I think what's shocking about this, or what's most shocking about this announcement, is that it's draped in this mask of it being part of a climate plan. And I think yesterday you saw the Prime Minister pressed when he makes these commitments to net zero emissions by 2050, when he's veering way off course to meet the commitments that he personally signed on to to meet Paris commitments by 2030. I mean, the fact is this is just a distraction. Yesterday he got called on it. People said, you don't have a plan, you don't have real actions laid out. And today he came out with $2,000 subsidy to send kids to camp. That's not a climate plan.
All right, Tom Parkin, what's your view on this? And in the context of Jagmeet Singh today was talking about the need to provide rental benefits, a supplement for families who can't afford to pay for rent if it's more than 30% of their before tax income. How do you view this announcement from Justin Trudeau today?
Well, Peter, this is the next installment on the paper napkin tour. We've seen a series of announcements over the last few days that no detail. When pressed, as mentioned, when pressed the other day for details on the climate plan, it was, well, let's get elected first and we'll figure it out later, sort of. You know, I think people can see through this. Singh's plan, well, I should say, back it up and just say, you know, this is why we have a housing crisis. It's because there hasn't been sufficient policy detail to people's real needs, and rents go up and up and up. And Mr. Trudeau's housing plan, his much ballyhooed billions of dollars kind of mirage plan, as it turns out from the PBO, it actually delivers 19% less money based on GDP, 19% less related to GDP than the Harper plan did. And we were all very critical of the Harper plan. So we have less and less social housing and affordable housing getting built according to requirement. So you know, the market gets tighter, the prices go up.
Right,
and here is the crisis. So Mr. Singh's thing is, we can put more money into building, but people are living in a crisis right now, and they need the help to make the rent because we have so many people who cannot even, who are spending far more than 30% of their household income.
Jeff, let me let
rents.
you respond to that. And it's in the context of we heard Justin Trudeau on the campaign trail today too, slamming Doug Ford again and cuts. And I guess some people wonder, well, okay, if we have $150 million to encourage more families to go camping, isn't that money that could be better spent on housing or better spent on transfers to the provinces, for instance?
I think those expenditures are happening, and they're part of the plan, and this is a supplement to that. And in terms of the wisdom of doing it, I think it knits well into the entire plan. But the Liberals certainly do have policy on housing, on affordability issues, on helping people retrofit their homes to make them more energy efficient. They're addressing this. They're addressing this through other social policy levers, like I mentioned before. The Canada Child Benefit lifted 900,000 Canadians, including 300,000 children, out of poverty, with 6,400 tax-free dollars in their pocket on an annual basis. In fact, they're raising that number for parents of infants.
All right. Let me talk about the climate marches tomorrow. We're going to have more on that in our program coming up. But Andrew, let me start with you. Justin Trudeau is going to be in Montreal. Elizabeth May is going to be in Montreal for the climate marches. Jagmeet Singh will be at the climate march in Victoria. Andrew Scheer is taking a pass. How come?
Well, look, these marches are happening from coast to coast. I think he said today, you know, they're an important sign, an important signal to show that Canadians are united in the need to do something about climate change, and we are. And in large part, a lot of the a lot of the policies are very similar amongst the parties on this. So while conservative candidates across the country will be partaking in it, the leaders decided that he's added his voice of support to this. We'll have candidates across the country supporting
Doesn't
these
it say
marches.
something? Doesn't it say something different though if the leader of a party in an election campaign, the man who wants to be prime minister, isn't part of the march? He says, "I'll send somebody else."
No, I think a march is one thing. I think a record is another thing, and I think what Canadians really care about is holding to account those people that have actual records on this. And the only person that has to answer for a record of failure on delivering on the policies that affect climate change is Justin Trudeau himself.
Jeff, let me go to you on this, and then I'll go to Tom Parkin. Why is it important for a leader to be there?
It's important to show that they resonate with what a supermajority of citizens in this country are starting to really, really focus on, which is that climate change is an existential threat to our way of life, it's an existential threat to our economy, and it's an existential threat to the economic security of Canadians. To deal with that, now on the flip side, in our polling, people are very concerned about it, but people are also very leery of how it's going to impact, any actions are going to impact their personal situation. Right. So a responsible government is trying to balance those two. And I think what's being offered by the other parties is either let's go backwards backwards and let's not set hard targets and let's just hope that people invent some technology. And on the other side, let's kick out the jams from Canadian economic fundamentals and put at risk the economic security with some really radical social and economic transformations. The plan in the middle, I think, has shown to Canadians over the last 4 years that things that have been said were impossible have been done, action has been taken, and progress is being made. And I think the Liberal plan, I think, probably resonates with more people than our critics.
Tom, let me hear you on this. As I say, Jagmeet Singh, the NDP leader, will be at the march in Victoria. Should Andrew Scheer be there, and that he's not there says what to you, and respond to Geoff Turner as well?
Well, Mr. Scheer is going to make his own decision, but I think he's sending a signal to his own support base in the way that he sends a signal to his support base about non-attendance at Pride events. It's a subtle thing of not really my constituency. I don't really care too much. The last 4 years have really been a failure on the climate front. We've got Environment Canada reports that show that between 2016 and 17, our carbon emissions actually went up. We have a prime minister who just in the last few days, and many of his other ministers and MPs were saying, oh, this is all fine. We got it so in hand that we're already going to nail the 2015 date. Well, nobody believes that. And it's now becoming a matter of trust. How can we listen to Mr. Trudeau say that the 2013 target is basically already met when there's no report that says such a thing? In fact, the Parliamentary Budget Office said that the price on carbon would have to go, I think, to over $100. I think it might have been $103, right. And we're at $20 right now. That's just evidence that there's a gap to be worked on. And for him to tell us that there is no such gap, that's just not true. He can't continue to say those things.
We'll have to leave it on that. Tom Parkin, Andrew Brander, and Geoff Turner, thank you all for your time today. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Peter.